So here's something I've been thinking about, okay? Now, most of us who grew up in the 90s, and I'm talking about the core of this audience who listens to this or watches it, the people who really lived this decade were born between, like myself, 1982 and 1989, right? Which means the 80s, well, we don't really like remember them for what they were and what they are, right? Like not properly, not with the kind of clarity where you can actually compare 2 decades, okay? Like we can now. Most of us were 3, 4, 5 years old when the 80s pretty much hit their peak. The big hair, the neon, right? The shoulder pads, the movies, all of that. Hell, for some of us, our parents, even the Cold War, if they were watching a lot of the news back then, the tension over everything like that, things that not a lot of people cared for, but some others were paying a lot of attention to. Now, we were too young to feel any of this. We were just kids who didn't know what decade we were in. And honestly, we probably didn't care. So when people say the 90s felt completely different from the 80s, most of us can't actually make that comparison like we can today with the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, at least from my personal experience. Now, we can't say I remember things when they actually changed, right? We can't because we weren't old enough to be aware of those things that were kind of changing between the 80s and the 90s. But here's where we can and what we can say. We can say that by the time we were old enough to actually be aware of the world around us, old enough to pretty much watch TV and understand and not just kind of just like laugh at things that were going on the big screen. Yeah, if you had like a 20-inch, that was a big screen. Old enough to know what was playing on the radio, old enough to go to school and have opinions and arguments and things that we cared about. Well, the world we woke up in pretty much where we were almost into our preteens, right? I want to say that was 1991, right? 1991. Yeah, I was 9 years old. And when you look at what was happening in 1991, we'll go over this, right? You understand why it felt like its own thing, why it felt like something new, right? It was completely different from 89 and 90, right? That jump. Because I believe that from 89 to 90, not a lot of things changed. We were kind of just getting, into the new decade. The Gulf War, by the way, ending with a 100-hour ground campaign in 1991 that played out live on television in a way that no conflict had ever had before. That I could remember because my uncle was part of Desert Storm. I remember the Bulls winning their first championship and the beginning of the dynasty that started back then with them. Movies coming out that redefined what films were allowed to look like and what they were allowed to make you feel. That's something else I started specifically remember back then. Magic Johnson standing at a podium. I remember this as well, and changing a national conversation in just like 3 minutes, right? In school, the older generation, teachers that were in their 30s going into their 40s, that were talking a lot about the Soviet Union, the thing that, had our parents kind of had grown up genuinely afraid of, right? That all dissolved on Christmas Day. What about music? The music, albums dropping that didn't just chart. They kind of rewrote what like music, specifically rock music, was supposed to sound like going forward. All of it in 1 year. That's why I believe personally 1991 pretty much feels like the moment, not because we remember the world shifting or what we were actually doing on a day-to-day, but because 1991 is the world we woke up in when we finally were old enough to see and feel the little nuances that was happening around us. And it turned out to be something special. Friends, welcome back to In Case I Missed It. This episode, this is our second year recap. As I mentioned before, every 4 episodes, we're going to revisit a year in the decade. We already visited 1990. We're going to now revisit 1991. Buckle up, friends. We're not slowing down. We're only moving up from here. Let's get into it right now. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to In Case I Missed It. I am your host, Alex. It is Saturday morning. I missed last week. Let's just put it this way. I'm writing a movie. I'm working on a new show. I'm working on multiple things that are on the back end I can't talk about. I got things at where I'm working at, my 9 to 5 that keeps me busy, like really busy. There's just a lot. And there's times that I really want to get down and just record and edit, and just the time just quickly disappears. So that's why we're here today. I apologize for missing a show. But we're going to continue here. I want to give a big shout out to my friends over at Nerd Initiative. If you guys don't know, go check them out. I'm part of their team, pretty much going over films and movies and TV and streaming. It's going to be fun. Something I wanted to do. I love nerd culture, and I figured why not join up with these guys? I see them all the time, and they're amazing. So check out nerdinitiative.com. I'm going to be one of their writers there. I'll be making videos, and I will also be joining them on their lives on Thursdays whenever possible. So Nerd Initiative, follow them absolutely everywhere. Let's get right into this, man. Let's talk about last week or the week before. We did the early internet episode, AOL chat rooms, AIM, and the away message that was definitely about, someone. We don't know who, but it was definitely someone. The screen name you chose that became your whole digital identity. We remember talking about GeoCities and the MIDI music that would just play in the background that didn't have a pause button. I remember adding music to my web pages and not being sorry about it. We talked about Napster, about the one 18-year-old in a dorm room accidentally ending the music industry, plus the top 5 list. If you guys heard it, make sure you go back and if you haven't, and listen to it. That list now, these top 5 lists are going to be permanent in every episode. And I want to hear from you guys when you hear the list, if you guys agree. And if you guys have your own top 5, that'd be cool. So I see you guys writing and interacting with my videos over on TikTok and Instagram. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Also here on YouTube. And if you're listening on the audio version, yes, we're also on YouTube. So keep everything coming. But today, friends, we're doing something different. Today's our second year recap episode. And if you listened, like I mentioned before, to the 1990 recap, you know how these goes. We zoom out, we look at the entire picture, movies, music, TV, sports, world events, everything that was happening simultaneously in one year and how it all connects. And I want to say this up front because 1991 might be the most loaded single year in the entire decade. I might be saying that a lot about other years too, but this one feels like it. I've been thinking about how to pace this episode because there's almost a little too much. Every section I start writing, I think, oh, wait, God, and then this happened. And then something else happened. All in the same year. It never stops. So let's just jump right into this right now. We'll start off. It's January 1991. Before we get to the music and to the movies, I need to start with that, with what was happening in the world, because it shapes absolutely everything else that was going on. And specifically as a United States Marine, and something repeating about 10 years later, we're talking about the Gulf War. Operation Desert Storm launched on January 17th, 1991, a U.S.-led coalition of 35 nations responding to Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, the largest military operations since World War II. And here's why this matters. For understanding the culture that was 1991, okay? It was the first war most Americans watched live on television. CNN's around-the-clock coverage, by the way, night vision footage of Baghdad, press briefings broadcast in real time, the whole country watching the same thing at the same moment. I, for sure as hell, remember it even as a kid, as a 9-year-old. All right, the ground campaign lasted 100 hours. 100 hours. Kuwait was liberated, the coalition withdrew, and America came out of it feeling something it hadn't fully felt in a long time. Like it had done something right. You know, that feeling, that post-Gulf War optimism, is in the culture of 1991. You can feel it in the movies that got made, in the music that broke through, in the general sense of that the country was pretty much turning a corner. And 2 weeks before Desert Storm launched, we had Super Bowl 25, the New York Giants versus the Buffalo Bills, January 27th, 1991 in Tampa, Florida. And before the game even started, Whitney Houston sang the national anthem. But I need you to understand something about that specific performance. If you weren't old enough to feel it, the country was 9 days away from going to war. American troops were in position. The tension was real. The stakes were super high as they'd been in decades. And Whitney Houston walked out to that microphone and sang the Star-Spangled Banner in the way that made people just completely stop breathing. The performance has been widely cited as the greatest Super Bowl national anthem in history. I'm not even kidding you. It wasn't just singing, it was a moment, a country hearing its own anthem and feeling it in a completely different way because of what was coming. Now, Whitney Houston that day was operating on a frequency that almost no performer has ever accessed. And then the game, one of the most dramatic Super Bowls ever played. The Giants win 20-19, and the way they win it, the Bills kicker, Scott Norwood, a 47-yard field goal attempt. 8 seconds left. Bills down by 1. The kick goes up and sails wide right. Wide right. The Giants win the Super Bowl. Scott Norwood walks off that field carrying something he'd carried for the rest of his life. Wide right became a phrase, not just a description, an actual phrase. That's what it means when a moment is big enough to enter our language. Now let's move on to the music, because 1991 is one of the most musically significant years in modern history, and I want to make sure we give it what it deserves. Let me paint the landscape first. Going into 1991, the dominant sounds in music were hair metal and New Jack Swing and whatever Michael Jackson was putting out, which was always its own category. And then there were 3 things that happened that year that permanently changed what music pretty much sounded like. Let's talk about that first thing. It happened on September 24th, 1991. Nirvana released Nevermind. And the week Nevermind came out, nothing happened. Not right away, by the way. It sold reasonably. People liked it. But it wasn't immediately obvious that anything was different. And then the word spread the way word spreads in 1991. Person to person, radio to radio, MTV to MTV. And by January 1992, Nevermind had knocked Michael Jackson's Dangerous off the #1 spot on the Billboard charts. I mean, completely knocked Michael Jackson off #1. Nirvana from Aberdeen, Washington. 3 guys who looked like they never owned a hairbrush in their damn lives. And I remember this. I was a young little Puerto Rican boy going, wow. I have friends, by the way, who were into this. Okay, I was living in Union City, New Jersey. And it was a mesh of different people from all different types of walking life, okay? But specifically, I remember my friend Gerardo, who used to listen to Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Nirvana. Crazy. And everything, by the way, that had dominated rock music in the 80s, the big productions, the hair, the power ballads, the posturing, all of it started to feel like it belonged to a completely different era. Literally overnight, almost, yeah, pretty much overnight, yeah. Nevermind. Nevermind didn't just become a hit. It became a before and after line in the history of rock music. Here's thing number 2. The Black Album, and this is the one I'm talking about. Metallica's self-titled 5th album came out on August 12, 1991, 6 weeks before Nevermind, and went to number one in 10 countries simultaneously. Metallica had been one of the biggest metal bands in the world for years, and the Black Album was my introduction into rock music, by the way, given to me by Gerardo. I still remember you, bro. Okay? The Black Album crossed Metallica over into something bigger and larger. It became the best-selling album of the entire decade in America. 2 albums, both dropped in the same 6-week window. Both changed the music permanently in the same fall, in the same year. And by the way, that Metallica Black Album, it was all black with a little snake coiled in the corner. I had it as a video cassette. Not video cassette, as a cassette. It's a cassette tape. Yes. I wish I still had it. Thing number 3. This one is personal and specific, and I need you all to feel it. Okay? Because this is a time in my life when I was really getting into American culture, American music. Yes, Puerto Ricans are still Americans. But coming over from the island just a year and a half before this, I was still learning things here and really trying to feel them out. Okay. REM, remember them? Released Out of Time in March of 1991. Losing My Religion, Shiny Happy People, one of the most emotionally resonant records of the year. Losing My Religion still slaps today. And all of this was happening in rock. Bryan Adams, Everything I Do It For You, from the Robin Hood Prince of Thieves soundtrack, spent 16 weeks at number 1. 16 weeks from a movie soundtrack back in the day. That is the wild diversity of that year in music. Nirvana, Metallica, REM, and Bryan Adams' ballad from Robin Hood that nobody could stop playing. Even today. Even people today still enjoy it. 1991 contained multitudes, okay? Let's talk about the movies now of 1991. Let's keep it moving here, baby. We're on a roll. Terminator 2 Judgment Day, July 3rd, 1991. James Cameron comes back to the franchise he'd started back in 1984 and makes something that wasn't supposed to be possible. He made the sequel better than the original. He made it so much better that it made the original look like a rough draft. The liquid metal T-1000. CGI effects so far ahead of anything at that time that anyone has seen before that people in theaters genuinely didn't even understand what the hell they were looking at. The movie at the time cost $102 million to make. At the time, one of the most expensive films ever. It made $520 million worldwide. And beyond the spectacle, T2, Terminator 2, did something interesting with its story. The Terminator, who had been the villain, was now the protector. John Connor had nobody else, and something in that relationship, the machine learning, what it meant to care about a human being, hit people in a way that action movies weren't even supposed to hit them. And man, kind of sounds like what's happening now. Almost 40 years later. Crazy. Listen, I remember the line, "I know now why you cry, but it's something I can never do." You remember that? Remember that line? Grown people cried at a Terminator movie. That's not a shot, by the way. That, my friends, is a compliment. And then the Silence of the Lambs. We'll continue going here. February 1991, Jodie Foster, Anthony Hopkins, Clarice Starling, and Hannibal Lecter across a plexiglass wall. The movie won all 5 major Academy Awards. Crazy. Just crazy. It won Best Picture, Director, Actor, Actress, Screenplay. Only the 3rd film in history to achieve that sweep. And by the way, Hannibal Lecter, who is in the movie for about 16 minutes total, became one of the most iconic characters in cinema history, still today, by the way. 16 minutes. One of the most memorable screen presence in history of the medium. Again, says someone who loves film, studies film, does film, writes film. That's insane. Anthony Hopkins earned the Oscar for just 16 minutes of work. Let's talk about Beauty and the Beast. Disney's animated masterpiece became the first animated film ever to be nominated for a Best Picture at the Academy Awards. That's not even a footnote, friends. That was a revolution. Let's talk about Boys in the Hood. John Singleton, 23 years old, writing and directing a film about growing up in South Central Los Angeles that was so specific and so true and so unflinching that it became one of the defining American films of the decade. I remember watching this in film class. John Singleton was nominated for Best Director. God, look at 23 years old, the youngest person ever nominated at that time, and the first Black director ever nominated. 1991 was insane. What a great time for film. Obviously, it gets better, but I mean, what a way to start, huh? Let's talk about sports in 1991. We can't talk about sports without talking about the Chicago Bulls. Let's talk about that. June 12th, 1991. Bulls over the Lakers in 5 games. Michael Jordan's first championship. For people who had been watching Jordan since he entered the league in 1984, who had watched him score 50 points in playoff games that the Bulls still lost, who had watched the bad boy Pistons physically punish him year after year. This was the moment. The thing you'd been waiting for, the proof that the best player in the freaking world was also going to win. And Jordan celebrating with the trophy, crying, holding it, sitting on the floor of the locker room. Everyone had that freaking, either that trading card or that poster or that Trapper Keeper with it on it, or the binders, anything. I mean, people were sticking that picture everywhere. Because people, by the way, understood what they were watching. Not just a championship. It was the beginning of a dynasty. And then November 7th, 1991. Let's talk about November 7th, 1991. Magic Johnson, okay? You guys know Magic Johnson. Still out there doing his thing. Magic Johnson announced he is HIV positive. And everyone just froze. Right? HIV it's a big deal back then. Still is, but it's a big deal. And I want to be careful about how I talk about this because this deserves care. 1991. Listen to this. 1991 was a time when HIV and AIDS were still surrounded by enormous fear. Enormous stigma, misinformation. The disease had been killing people for over a decade. And the cultural response had been silence, shame, turning away. I remember in school, everyone was just scared. Maybe if you kissed someone, you got AIDS. Maybe if you shook hands with someone who had AIDS, you got AIDS. There was just a lot going on around it. And then Magic Johnson, one of the most beloved athletes in America, pretty much the face of professional basketball's golden era, stood at a podium. He mentions that he's HIV positive, and the conversation pretty much changed at that point instantly because Magic Johnson was beloved in a way that made it impossible to kind of just look away and not say anything. And when he said it, when this man that America loved said those words, it kind of forced a conversation that the country had been avoiding. Magic Johnson didn't just announce something. He changed how America talked about HIV, about AIDS, about who and how it affected people, right? About who deserved compassion. He became an advocate. He educated, he fundraised, he lived against predictions at the time, and he kept showing up. And 2 weeks later, on November 24th, 1991, right, Freddie Mercury passed away. Okay? The lead singer of Queen, one of the greatest stage presence in the history of rock music, was gone at the age of 45 years old. And the combination of these two November moments, Magic's announcement and Freddie's death, put A's on the front page in a way that had never fully been looked at before. It wasn't one conversation anymore, right? It was the conversation. And then on Christmas Day in 1991, okay, we had the Soviet Union officially dissolving. I love politics too. I'm big into politics, so this was kind of big. And even back then, like we were kids, but this was a big moment. The Cold War, the 45-year standoff between two nuclear superpowers that pretty much defined the geopolitical landscape of every person's entire lifetime at that moment, was over. The USSR, which had existed since 1922, was officially gone. We talked in the 1990 episode about the Cold War beginning to end, the wall coming down, Germany reunifying, the psychological shift that was happening. Well, December 25th, 1991 was the moment. It was officially, completely, finally done. And I keep thinking about that specific Christmas, right? Because in 1991, because like for people who had grown up with that anxiety here in the United States, that nuclear anxiety as background noise, who had done the duck and cover drills, who had lived their entire lives in the shadow of destruction, that Christmas Day they finally realized, well, that was over. A completely different world than the one they'd been pretty much born into. And because 1991 cannot be all heavy stuff, right? I'm a gamer. Someone listening to this out there is as well. Because in August of 1991, the Super Nintendo launches in North America. Super Mario World, A Link to the Past, F-Zero, Pilot Wings. And 1 month earlier, Sonic the Hedgehog hit the Sega Genesis. The console wars were beginning. The greatest gaming era, okay? The greatest competition in gaming in the history of the medium started right there, right here in 1991. What about for those young enough or old enough that were there? Lollapalooza festival that took place in the summer of 1991, right? Jane's Addiction's touring alternative music festival that pretty much put 9-inch Nails, the Banshees, Living Color, okay, all on their traveling bill. My friends, alternative music as a mainstream event, the idea that counterculture could fill in a theater, amphitheater, anything, any music place. It was a change, man. It was insane. It was something that I don't think anyone that was old enough at that time to realize what was happening knew there was something amazing going on, right? 1991 did all sorts of things. And we talk about it. 1990 did its own thing. 1991, man, it felt different, right? But now I want to move to one of my segments called the Did You Know segment. Did you know, though? Okay, we're going to talk about 3 facts about 1991 that are going to pretty much tell you a little bit more and go a little bit deeper into what was happening. Okay, we already spoke about this one, but let's dig a little deeper right now. Okay, number 1, Nevermind by Nirvana, one of the most important albums in rock history, and the iconic cover, the naked baby swimming towards a dollar bill on a hook, was Kurt Cobain's idea. He'd seen a documentary about water births and sketched the concept himself. The baby on the cover is Spencer Eldon. He was 4 months old when the photo was taken. He was paid $200. $200 to be on the cover of one of the best-selling albums in rock history, which sold over 30 million copies. Spencer Eldon has said publicly that growing up as the Nevermind baby was a complicated experience, which is completely understandable when you think about it for even 30 seconds. because, the image itself, that underwater shot, the dollar bill, the outstretched hand, became one of the most recognized images in the history of recorded music. All for $200. Let's talk about number 2. The Silence of the Lambs holds a record that almost certainly will probably never be broken. It won all 5 major Academy Awards. Picture, director, actor, actress, screenplay. Only 2 other films in history have ever done this. It happened one night in 1934. And what was it? And One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in 1975. 3 films in nearly a century of cinema. And The Silence of the Lambs did it as a horror film. Okay? I love horror too. You guys know this. A genuine people slept with the lights on horror film. Okay? Like that's the type of film it was. Right? Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm the only one who like watches it with a background lamp on. Now, horror had never won Best Picture before. Horror has not won Best Picture since 1991, I think was the only time. And it did it with a villain who appears on screen for, as I said before, 16 minutes total. Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins, my man. Oscar for Best Actor for 16 minutes of work. Let's talk about number 3, Magic Johnson's announcement, right? Magic Johnson's announcement on November 7, 1981 had immediate and measurable effect on HIV testing in America. In the weeks following the press conference, clinics across the country reported testing requests just skyrocketed significantly. People who had never considered getting tested walked into clinics because a man who they trusted, told them something real about his own life. That is what a celebrity can do when it's, or celebrity itself, right, can do when it's used with honesty and courage. One press conference, millions of people making a different decision about their own health. Today, we call them influencers. A lot of these influencers today have the power to steer you the right way or steer you the wrong way. And we're not going to get into that right now, but you know what I mean. Magic Johnson has said in interviews that the letters he received in the weeks after from people who got tested, from people who found out they were positive and could now get treatment, from people whose lives changed because he spoke, those letters are among the most meaningful things he has ever received. He played again eventually. He won an Olympic gold medal in 1992. But most importantly, he lived. And his decision to speak publicly on November 7th, 1991 is one of the most consequential things an athlete has ever done of a playing field, okay? That leads me now to top 5 time, baby. And this particular list, I'm going to be honest with you, was actually very hard to make. Because when I started ranking the moments from 1991 that changed things, I pretty much had like 25. I had to cut a bunch of them down, all right, that in any other year would be number 1 on the list. That's 1991. That's what kind of year 1991 was. No lies here, friends. And I'm wearing my Mario shirt right now for those of you who can watch on YouTube. So I'm living it. I'm living 1991. We saw Super Mario. So here it is with the acknowledgement that everything I didn't put on here still changed things, by the way. Top 5 moments from 1991 that permanently changed everything. Let's start with number 5, Beauty and the Beast getting nominated for Best Picture. Look, I know. In the same year, Nirvana and Terminator 2 and Magic Johnson, we're doing all these things that change landscapes. A Disney animated movie at number 5 feels like an odd thing, but just stay with me for a second. Because before 1991, animated films were not considered for Best Picture. Not because the Academy had ruled it out. It just wasn't done. Animation was seen as a category apart. Okay. Beauty and the Beast changed that by being so emotionally complete, so well written, so well scored, so genuinely moving, that ignoring it would pretty much have been dishonest for all. And the Academy said so. The nomination opened a door that has never pretty much been closed. Every animated film that has gotten recognition in the decades since traces that path back to 1991. That was number 5. Number 4, wide right. Scott Norwood's missed field goal at the end of Super Bowl 25. Why does a missed kick change everything? Well, I'll tell you why. For you sports fanatics out there, and I'm one of them, because it started the Buffalo Bills' 4 consecutive Super Bowl appearances from 1991 through 1994 with 4 consecutive losses. No team in professional sports history has ever gone, 4 straight championship games and lost all 4. And that run, that particular combination of getting there every single year and losing every single year, changed how we talk about sports and heartbreaks. The Bills showed up, they kept showing up, and it just kept not being enough. Wide right was the first domino in one of the most fascinating, sad stories in the history of professional sports. That was number 4. Let's talk about number 3, Terminator 2 and what it did to the movies, not just in the box office, not just the CGI, though the CGI alone was enough, right, to make everyone in film effects go back to the drawing board because they were outstanding. What Terminator 2 did was raise the bar, raise the ceiling. Before Terminator 2, there was an accepted limit of what the blockbuster action film could look like and feel like. After Terminator 2, that limit didn't exist anymore. Every director making a big film after 1991 was now competing with a different standard, different bar. The movie didn't just make money, right? It changed what the movies that came after were allowed to try. That was number 3. Number 2, we just talked about it, Magic Johnson's announcement. What belongs on this, on this list is the simple fact that the conversation about HIV in America was different, not gradually different, not slowly different, immediately, permanently different right after Magic Johnson came out and talked. One person, again, one press conference, a country that had been averting its eyes finally had to look, That's important because certain things like this change the scope of how we treat and look at what's happening around us. That moment, that specific thing that happened then, is still resonates today because one single moment where we all talk or someone says something could change everything. I mean, look at the world where we are right now. Prices are skyrocketing. No help in sight. People being kidnapped off the streets. There's a lot there. I'm not getting into it now, but yes, that was number 2. And number 1, let's talk about Nevermind. Not just because it was a great album, though, it really is a great album. One of the greatest albums, I think, of that specific time. The album critics and historians and fans have been returning to this type of conversation about this for the last 30 years. Number 1, because of what it ended and what it started. That's why I'm putting it here. It ended the era of heavy, like that super heavy hair metal as the dominant sound of rock music. It did. And it started grunge, started alternative as a mainstream proposition. I love it. To me, I grew up with Spanish music, and it just changed the way I was listening to music at the time, right? It really did. Kurt Cobain was very, even in interviews, if you remember, very uncomfortable with almost everything around him that came after that album. The fame, the expectation, the weight of it all. The things the album set in motion were things he pretty much hadn't asked for and wasn't sure he wanted. But the music was real. And whatever else you can say about it, that music was real, friends. Like, that's what it was, man. And people heard that, even back then, Like, I listen to a lot of Spanish music, and Spanish music has a lot of feeling as well. But it had always been like that. Latin music had roots, always talking about something, family, life, slavery, whatever, hardships. It was embedded into the music. And I think that listening to this specific alternative album, and how he spoke and how he put his thoughts on paper, and it came out like, you can't deny it, 30 plus million copies, man, sold in every, by the way, in every country that has rock music. For every generation of listeners who heard it for the first time, even today in this time, okay, in 2026, and felt exactly what the people who heard it or still feel like the people who, sang this song back in 1991, right? Like how they felt. The people listening, how they felt when they were listening. People today still feel like that. You see, that doesn't happen with an album that isn't real. So number one, Nevermind. If you've never listened to it, go back and listen to that. That was my list. And I know Boys in the Hood was big. We spoke about the Soviet Union. We spoke about music festivals and whatnot. Super Nintendo, the Gaming Wars. Any of these could have been there, right? Tell me what I got wrong. Tell me what should have been number one. Drop your list in the comments and let's actually debate this, because 1991 deserves to have a little extra love sent this way. But friends, thank you for listening today. That is today's episode 8, the year 1991. And I want to say something before I let you go that I think about every time I do these year recap episodes. When you were actually living inside 1991, when you were 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, going through that year, you didn't know what it was. You didn't know the album Nevermind or Black, whatever, was going to change music. You didn't know the Bulls winning was the beginning of the greatest dynasty in NBA history. You didn't know Magic Johnson's announcement was going to shift the national conversation. You didn't know the Soviet Union dissolving had a hinge point in human history for those that came before us. We, collectively, were just living. Going to school, watching TV, renting movies, playing in the arcades, arguing about Sonic versus Mario, buying trading cards, collecting comic books, playing outside till the outdoor light turned on, which you had to come home. Just living your life inside something that turned out to be, as I like to say, goddamn extraordinary. That's the thing about great years, by the way. You only know they were great after you left them. You have to come back to them, like we're doing right now, to understand what you were doing inside of that year, right? And 1991 was something. It was genuinely something. 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If this episode took you back, if you went somewhere today you hadn't been in about 30 years, go leave that review right now. 30 seconds. It matters. And share this with whoever you lived 1991 through with, whatever, parents, friends, cousins. Because next week we leave the year recap and we go back to our regular episode. And we're going somewhere that every kid who stayed up late on a Monday night knows. Episode 9, we're talking about professional wrestling. We're talking about WCW, ECW, WWF, the Attitude Era, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, D-Generation X, Sting, Cactus Jack, the Monday Night Wars, when wrestling wasn't just wrestling, when Monday nights were a cultural event. That whole school, the whole school, like all your friends, everyone talked about on a Tuesday morning during breakfast time or lunchtime or whatever. And how 2 shows went to war and changed television for everything. Come back again Saturday morning, my friend. I'm Alex, and as always, in case I missed it, the 90s were better. See you Saturday.